The night settled over the quiet neighborhood, like a heavy blanket, and the young mother moved along the cracked sidewalk with her child. Close beside her, the street lamps cast pale cones of light that flickered with every cold gust of wind, making the path ahead feel uncertain and shifting. She kept her steps steady, even though her mind churned with the exhaustion of a long shift and the familiar worry of getting home. Safely after dark, her child clutched her sleeve in a silent request for reassurance, sensing her tension even if unable to understand its cost. She breathed deeply and tried to keep her voice calm as she encouraged the child onward. But as they turned the corner, she felt a change in the air. The night seemed to grow stiller, heavier, as if waiting for something to unfold. Footsteps echoed faintly behind them, and even though they were soft, her trained instincts sharpened. She had learned long ago to trust the subtle warnings that most people brushed aside a lifetime before motherhood, a lifetime that those around her would never guess had conditioned her to recognize danger before it fully revealed itself. She slowed her pace just slightly, listening to the rhythm of the steps behind them. They did not sound random. They matched her stride at a cautious distance, as though testing her awareness. Her heart tightened, but her expression stayed smooth. Her child tugged her sleeve, pointing toward the dim outline of their building at the far end of the street. But she guided the child gently forward, choosing not to rush, since sudden movement could trigger pursuit. Instead, she pretended not to notice anything unusual, forcing herself to breathe evenly despite the coil of alertness tightening inside her. The steps grew louder, gaining confidence as if encouraged by her apparent obliviousness. One shadow stretched across the sidewalk, then another. She could see them now in the corner of her eye, figures lingering at the edge of the lamplight, trying to calculate her response. She recognized the pattern. They believed they had found someone vulnerable, someone burdened with a child, someone who would offer no resistance. She felt a cold sadness rise within her, not for herself, but for her child, who should never have to witness the darker parts of the world. She shifted her stance subtly, moving her body between the child and the approaching shadows. The men closed in at a slow, deliberate pace. Their voices were low and muffled, but their intent was clear. They formed a loose half-circle around her, subtly cutting off her path forward. The child felt the change and pressed closer to her side. Whimpering softly, the sound pierced her heart. But she stayed steady. Her training had taught her to separate emotion from action, and now she had to summon every ounce of control she possessed. She bent slightly as to comfort the child, whispering a gentle reassurance, even as her eyes tracked every movement around her. They stepped closer. Emboldened by her quiet posture, one man reached out a hand, not to offer help, but to test the boundaries of her fear. She felt the old instincts rising within her, the ones she had buried beneath years of civilian life routines and lullabies. But she willed herself to wait, to assess, to choose the precise moment when action would be unavoidable. The alley behind her was narrow and littered with debris. The open street ahead seemed far away, lit only by a flickering bulb that offered little promise of aid. There were no neighbors awake, no cars passing by. The silence felt absolute. The tallest of the men leaned forward, his shadow stretching across her shoes. He spoke with a tone that carried a dangerous mix of confidence and cruelty. Though his exact words mattered less than the intent behind them, he expected her to be frightened, to plead, to surrender control of the moment. She kept her breathing slow and low, like she once learned in night operations, focusing on the rhythm that grounded her. Even under pressure, she gently guided the child behind her legs, shielding the small body with her own. The child clung to her, trembling, but trusting her completely. One of the men glanced toward the child and smiled a cruel smile that never reached his eyes. That single look ignited something fierce inside her, a protective force stronger than any she had known, even during her most intense missions. Yet she still waited, motionless and calm. The men saw this as weakness and stepped closer, closing their trap. The cold light from above revealed their rough clothing and restless hands. She noted everything automatically: height, weight, dominant foot, possible concealed objects, potential paths of retreat, but she knew retreat was unlikely. She would have to confront them, but only when the safety of her child was assured. The tension around them grew taut, like a thin wire stretched to its limit. The child shifted nervously, and she laid a gentle hand on the small shoulder. Her touch steady, even though her muscles thrummed with the need to act. She calculated her surroundings, taking in every detail. The slick patches of pavement, the broken glass near the alley entrance, the distance to the curb, the nearest lamppost. All of it mattered. Every piece of the environment could be used to protect her child. If the moment demanded it, she felt time slow in that familiar way. It always had during operations. When danger sharpened her senses, another man stepped forward. Trying to grip her arm, his movement was quick, but he telegraphed his intent with a slight lean of his shoulder, and she noted it instantly. Still, she did not react. Not yet. The men believed they had cornered a helpless mother, and their arrogance made them careless. They did not know her past. They did not know the years she spent in silence and discipline on remote bases, or the demanding nights spent mastering skills few people possessed. They did not know she could read their posture like an open book, or that she was already constructing a plan with cold precision. The man reached again, emboldened by her lack of resistance. His hand came closer, closing the gap between them. While her heart raced with a quiet fury, she forced herself to move only slightly, turning her body in a way that shielded her child more fully. Their confusion grew. Now that they were close enough, she could smell the mix of sweat and cheap alcohol on them. But she did not let disgust or fear surface. She had one priority, and one priority only: to ensure her child remained unharmed. Their patience thinned as they grew frustrated by her silence and calm demeanor. One of them muttered something under his breath, stepping aggressively toward the child. Her body reacted with a silent internal scream, but she kept still, trusting herself to wait for the right trigger. The night seemed to hold its breath, as if sensing the storm building beneath her controlled exterior. She felt the familiar clarity of focus settle, and the one that had guided her through missions far more dangerous than this. Though none had ever mattered as deeply as protecting the small, trembling life behind her. The man closest to the child lowered his hand toward the small shoulder. His fingers hovered inches away, a deliberate provocation, a final test of her perceived helplessness. In that suspended moment, she felt her past and present collide. The years of training, the oath she once took, the discipline she had honed, the strength she had buried beneath motherhood, all surged through her as she prepared to respond with the precision she once lived by. Part 1 ends with that moment poised on the edge of eruption, the night waiting to witness what would follow. When she could no longer hold back the truth of who she was, the instant the man's hand drifted toward her child, a quiet shift awakened within her, like a tide rising with unstoppable force. Her eyes sharpened, and her muscles aligned with the practiced precision of years spent in disciplined training. She moved with a sudden fluidity that stunned the attackers who had expected fear instead of ferocious control. In one swift step, she angled her body sideways, placing herself between the reaching hand and her child, while grounding her stance in a way that gave her full command of the space around her. The first man reacted too slowly to her sudden motion. His confusion froze him for a heartbeat. And that was all she needed. She struck with a calculated blow aimed exactly where his balance was weakest. The impact sent him staggering backward, and he collapsed in shock, unable to comprehend how the quiet mother had dropped him so easily. The other men stared at her, unsure whether they had just witnessed luck or something far more dangerous. The child stood behind her, gripping the fabric of her jacket, but sensing instinctively that safety had returned. The second man lunged forward in a reckless attempt to overpower her, but his movements were wide and undisciplined. A simple shift of her weight allowed his momentum to betray him. She sidestepped with practiced ease, letting his force carry him forward, then guided his arm downward in a motion that sent him crashing toward The pavement, his shout echoed through the alley, but she remained silent. Her focus honed solely on eliminating the threat before any harm could reach her child. The remaining 2 attackers hesitated for the first time. Fear flickered in their eyes, as they realized the mother they had cornered was not the victim they imagined. She analyzed their posture, noting the tremor in their hands and the uncertainty in their stance. They were no longer predators. They were men, facing a force they did not understand. She advanced 1 careful step at a time, her presence controlled and grounded. Her calm made them retreat, but they soon realized escape would not be easy now that she had taken command of the encounter. One of them swung wildly, and she blocked the motion with an effortless deflection. Then she delivered a quick, precise strike that forced him back against the alley wall, leaving him gasping for breath. The final attacker panicked and attempted to run.